Today we'll talk about the tissue. Okay, so you know that in your body there are 4 different types of tissues present. So we'll talk about those 4 different types of tissues. So in this section, mostly you will learn how different types of tissues look like under the microscope. So actually you have already seen the pictures, right, of different types of tissues. Inflammation, the process that takes place in the tissue when the tissue get injured. So how your tissue responds to any injury, that's the inflammation. So we'll talk about that too. So let me log in first. Start. So 4 different types of tissues are connective tissue, right? Epithelial tissue, neural tissue, and muscle tissue or muscular tissue. So these are 4 different types of tissue. Now, each of these 4 has different subdivisions or subtypes, except the neural. Neural is only one type, but connective, there are many different types of connective, different types of epithelial, different types of muscle tissue. So we'll talk about those different types of tissues. First, what is a tissue? Tissue is a collection or group of many similar cells. So many similar cells combined together to form a tissue. And where you will find those 4 different types of tissues in general. This picture is showing the locations. First, nervous tissue. Nervous tissue forms the nervous system, right? So that is very simple. Nervous tissue forms the nervous system. And you already know, nervous system consists of brain, spinal cord, and the nerves. So those are the structures formed by this type of tissue. Muscle tissue. There are 3 types of muscle tissues. Cardiac muscle, which is a highly special type of muscle tissue, you know, that only present in the heart, right? Cardiac muscle is only in the heart. Skeletal muscle are attached to the skeleton. Very simple. Attached to the skeleton. That means attached to the bones. And smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is found in the wall of tube-like structures in your body. So what are the tube-like structures in your body? Can you mention a couple of these? Anybody? Esophagus is a tube-like structure. Small intestine, large intestine, right? Also, you know, the trachea, the air tube, right? How about arteries, veins? Those are also tube-like structures, right? So in the wall of those tube-like structures, you will find a smooth muscle. Okay, and also in the wall of hollow organs. In the wall of hollow organs and in the wall of tube-like organs or structures. So, smooth is found in those places. What are the hollow organs in your body? You know, stomach, right? Big, hollow, urinary bladder, right? That means there is a large cavity inside. So, uterus. So, those are the hollow organs. Stomach, uterus, urinary bladder in the wall of those organs. Then, epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue, there are two types. Glandular epithelium and lining epithelium. So, glandular epithelial tissue is found in the glands, okay, and lining epithelial tissue or epithelium is found in the inner surface of tube-like and hollow organs. You already know what are the tube-like organs and what are the hollow organs. So, innermost lining of these organs are formed by innermost linings are formed by the epithelial tissue. So, in the glands and in the inner lining of esophagus, if this is the esophagus, innermost like this, that is the epithelial tissue. Okay, if this is an hollow organ like your heart, this is the wall of the heart. So, innermost thin lining is the epithelial tissue. Okay, so like here and here. So, lining epithelium and glandular epithelium inside the glands. Now, the connective tissue. Connective tissue is most widely distributed tissue in your body. That means distributed in many places. Just you can write it down. Some common structures where you will find the connective tissue. Bones are connective tissue. Cartridges are connective tissue, right? Fats are connective tissue. Blood is a special type of connective tissue because it is liquid. So, those are some structures formed by connective tissue. Tendons, ligaments, bursa tendon, ligament, yeah. So, those are also connective tissue. So, let me quickly repeat again. Bones, cartilages, fats, right? Blood, which is a special type of connective tissue, tendons, ligaments, bursa or capsule of the joint, all those are connective tissue. Okay, so now you know where you will find different types of tissues in your body. Now we will talk individual tissues. First we will talk about the epithelial tissue, which is also known as epithelium. As I have already mentioned, by location we can divide the epithelial tissue into two types: glandular, you remember I just mentioned a few minutes ago, and lining epithelium. Lining is also, you can say, covering and lining epithelium. So those are two types: glandular and covering and lining epithelium. And you know here the lining epithelium is present, inner surface or innermost layer of the tube-like structures and hollow organs. So that is the classification based on the location, right? Glandular and covering and lining. There is another way we can classify the epithelial tissue that you have already learned in the lab part. That is actually based on not the location but number of layers and shape of the cell Okay, so based on these two things, we also classify the epithelial tissue. And you know that there are some epithelial tissues, the cells are flat. That is called squamous. You already know that. Squamous means flat. And if you see a single layer, that is called simple. So this is a simple squamous epithelial tissue. Because simple, why? Single layer. And squamous, why? Because flat. You know, the word squamous came from the scale of fish, you know, on the surface of the fish, the scales. So like that. So that is simple squamous. Now, another type of cells you will find in the epithelial tissue, those are cubical cells or cube-shaped cells, and if they form a single layer, that is called simple cuboidal. Simple cuboidal. A single layer of cube-shaped cells. Now, another type, cells are tall, like columns. You know, columns are used in buildings. So, single layer, that's why it is simple, and tall is columnar. So, this is simple columnar. Okay. Now, if you see more than one layer, that is called stratified. So now let's do something, add more layers. So this is no more simple columnar, right? Now it is what? Yeah. Stratified columnar. So this is now stratified. That means more than one layer. Okay, stratified columnar. If I add more layers here, this is called what now? Everybody? Stratified squamous. Okay. Similarly, stratified cuboidal. Stratified cuboidal. I showed you all these types of tissues under the microscope in the lab. So this is now stratified cuboidal. Okay. There is another type of epithelial tissue that is called transitional. Why that is called transitional? Because the shape of the cells changes. Always the shape of the cells is not fixed, changing. That's why it is called transitional. There is no static status. The shape is changing. If more pressure on the organ, then the cells get flat because of pressure. If less pressure, gets tall. Okay. And I'm not going to draw this because the cells change their shape, so there is no definitive shape of the cells. But just know that transitional is another type. And then the last one I will mention is called pseudo stratified. Pseudo stratified columnar. Okay. In this type of epithelial tissue, the cells form a single layer, but since the height of these cells is different, when you see under the microscope, although it is a single layer of columnar cells, it will look like more than one layer because all these are columnar cells, but the height is different. Okay, that's why it is called pseudo stratified. Pseudo means false, not true. Okay, so false multiple layer. Actually, it is a single layer. Pseudo stratified columnar. Now, in most of the cases, in pseudo stratified columnar, cells have cilia, soft hair-like structures on the apical end or upper end. You will see cilia. That's why it is also called pseudo stratified ciliated columnar because of cilia. Okay, so these are the classification based on the shape of the cells and number of layers present there. Okay, so this is another way to classify the epithelial tissue. Okay, now we will see the characteristics of epithelial tissue. How epithelial tissue is different than other three types of tissues. First, in epithelial tissue, you will see, you must remember, the cells have upper free end, which is called the apical end, and lower end is attached on a basement membrane, which is formed by a connective tissue, by the way. So the lower end is attached on the basement membrane, which is called the basal surface, and upper end is always free, and that is called the apical end. So this is the apical and this is the basal surface. Then sometime we see hair-like structures on the apical end. You must remember, just a few minutes before I showed you cilia. If you see, the hair like structures are soft and can move like this, that is called cilia. Cilia is very soft and can beat like this. if you see, the hair are kind of hard from brush border. These are called microvilli. So cilia and microvilli either could be present on the apical surface, but if you see they are soft and can move like this, that is called what? Cilia. If you see it's like kind of hard and staying like this, that is called the microvilli. Okay. The main function of the presence of cilia or microvilli, two, you can just write down: increase the surface area, extended surface area we get because of those structures. Number two, they work like broom. Brooms are used for what? Cleaning, right? Cleaning. So you will see many microvilli inside the nose, pharynx, trachea, where the mucus is secreted, cough, right? So should be cleared or cleaned. So two functions of microvilli or cilia: number one, cleaning; number two, increasing surface area. Inside the intestine, you know, water and food, nutrients are absorbed, right? Nutrients and water are absorbed. So you have microvilli inside the intestine to increase the surface area. More surface area, more absorption. Very simple, right? So those are the functions. Epithelial cells, you will always see they are attached to each other. You must remember I showed you different types of epithelial tissue. In all of those, what did you see? You saw that the cells are attached to each other, side by side, like this. And you have special junctions or intercellular junctions hold the cell members together. In previous class, you have learned that three types of intercellular junctions: tight junction, desmosome, gap junction, right? So those are the intercellular junctions, hold the epithelial cells attached to each other. So that is another important property of epithelial tissue. If you see connective tissue, you will see cells are not attached to each other. Like this, you have fibers sometimes, right? Matrix in between the cells. So that is connective tissue, typical connective tissue. So you see cells are not attached to each other. But in epithelial tissue, we always draw like this. Why? Because they are attached to each other. Epithelial tissue is avascular. A means absence. Vascular means blood vessels. So no circulation, no blood vessels present in epithelial tissue. That's why it is avascular. Now the question is, you may ask, if there is no blood flow, right? No blood vessels, then how the cells stay alive? How the cells get nutrition and oxygen, right? That's why you remember I said that basement membrane is a connective tissue, and always epithelial cells are resting on the basement membrane, which is a connective tissue, and connective tissue has plenty of blood vessels. So what happens, you see the blood vessels are here. So from here, by diffusion, nutrition and oxygen go to the epithelial tissue from underlying connective tissue or basement membrane. So from here, by diffusion, oxygen and nutrition enter into the epithelial tissue and keep the cells alive. Epithelial cells have high rate of regeneration. That means they can be quickly reproduced or regenerate, quickly be reproduced. You all know we lose the skin, right? Sometimes when skin gets very dry, what happens? Skin comes up, right? New skin is formed. If you get a scratch, right, on your skin, what happens? Healing occurs. New skin is formed. You all know that, right? When you drink something very hot, like coffee, you burn your epithelial cells inside the mouth, always, if you drink too hot tea or coffee. And after that you feel that, right, like inside the mouth, you don't taste the food. Then quickly new cells are reproduced. Okay, so that is another very important property of epithelial cells. So those are the characteristics of epithelial tissue. If I ask you, you should be able to answer. Now, in next few slides, what I will do, I will show you how different types of epithelial tissue look like under the microscope. Number one, you have already seen all these pictures and also under the microscope. But another thing is important here that you have to remember. I will mention few locations. You have to remember those locations, okay? Where you will find each type of epithelial tissue. You can underline or highlight those. I will mention, those are very important. So this is a simple squamous epithelial tissue. You see, inside the lung you have alveoli, and in the wall of the alveoli you see these are flat, single layer of flat cells like this. Actually, so this is one squamous cell, right? This is another squamous cell. This is another squamous cell, like this, from the wall of the alveoli, for example. So that's why this is called a simple squamous epithelial tissue. Where you will find simple squamous epithelial tissue, alveoli, which is also called air sac. So the alveoli of the lung, inside the lung you have the air balls or air sacs. Okay, inner surface of the blood vessels and heart. So inner surface of the blood vessels and the heart. And then another structure, capillary wall. In the wall of a capillary. So how many I have mentioned? Can you repeat? Okay, go ahead. Inner lining of blood vessel, inner lining of heart, right? Wall of the alveoli and capillary wall, right? So just remember those 4 locations where you will find simple squamous, very thin layer. Just for your information, inner lining of heart and blood vessel has another name that is called endothelium. In future, we will hear this term repeatedly, that's why it's good to know now. Endothelium is that inner lining of the blood vessel and the heart, endothelium. Okay. Simple cuboidal. In this picture, you see a cross section of many tube-like structures like this. If I have many tube-like structures like this, you see, and make a cross section like this, what I'll see rounds. So that's what you are seeing here. And in the wall of these tube-like structures, you have cuboidal cells. So this is one cuboidal cell, this is another, this is another. So you see cuboidal cells, this is one cell, this is nucleus, this is another cell, this is nucleus, right? Another cell, nucleus. So simple cuboidal. Where you will find simple cuboidal? You will find in the ducts of the glands. Ducts are tubes. You know, ducts are tubes. So ducts of the glands and kidney tubules. Inside the kidney, you have million of tubes, tube-like structures. So those are called nephrons. So in the wall of kidney tubules or nephron and the ducts of the glands, you will find simple cuboidal. Okay. Then let's go to next one. Simple columnar. This is very simple. You see a single layer of tall columnar cells. Where you will find simple columnar? Number one, in your GI tract, gastrointestinal tract, GI tract or gastrointestinal tract, but there is a condition: stomach and below, not above the stomach. Okay, stomach and below. That means stomach and what else you have below the stomach? Small intestine, large intestine, right? Very good. So, stomach and below, innermost lining, you have simple columnar. Above the stomach, you have different type of epithelial tissue. Let me see anything else you need to know. Gallbladder also important. So inner lining of gallbladder. Pseudo stratified columnar epithelium. You see cilia here. I have already mentioned this epithelial tissue helps in cleaning. So if you know that, where you will find that? In the upper respiratory tract, right? Upper respiratory tract. That means inside the nasal cavity, inside the trachea, right? Those are upper respiratory tract structures. Ducts of large glands, we see pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium, but mainly just know that upper respiratory tract. Stratified squamous, many layers of flat cells, you can see here, many layers of flat cells. That's why called stratified squamous. Now, there are two types of stratified squamous. One is called keratinized stratified squamous. Keratinized stratified squamous and another is non-keratinized stratified squamous. Okay, keratinized stratified squamous, sorry, KE, keratinized, KERA, keratinized and non-keratinized stratified squamous. keratinized. Why it is called keratinized? Because it has keratin, which is a special type of protein. Okay, that's why it is called keratinized. And non-keratinized doesn't have that protein inside the cells. Inside the cells, this one has keratin, this one does not. Now, keratinized stratified squamous is found in the skin. That means dry surface. Non-keratinized found in the mouth, esophagus, inside the vagina. Those are moist or wet surface. Okay, so keratinized in the dry surface and non-keratinized in the wet or moist surface. Now, the function of stratified squamous is providing protection. Protection is the main function of stratified squamous. Makes sense because you see stratified squamous has many layers, right? So if it is a single layer, it cannot protect, right? Because very thick. When many layers, that is thick, and that can help to protect the underlying tissue. Now, therefore, stratified squamous is found in those areas in your body where you have more chance of getting friction. More chance of getting friction. Make sense? So, those areas must be protected better. So, in those areas, like skin, if I ask you, tell me one structure that gets a lot of friction, skin, right? Body surface. So, that's why stratified squamous. Inside the mouth, when you chew the food, right? Always getting friction. Inside the esophagus, you know, esophagus is a narrow tube taking the food from the mouth to the stomach, right? So, narrow tube, so the chance of friction is high when food is passing, food bolus. Now, once the food goes to the stomach, it gets like liquid. Gets like liquid, so no more friction, right? So that's why those areas got stratified squamous. Transitional epithelial cells change their shape. Now, where you will find the transitional? Inside the urinary bladder, inside the ureters. So, in simple way to say is where you have urine. Who transports the urine? Ureter, right? You know that? From the kidney to the bladder. And who stores the urine? Bladder. Stores the urine. So, inside the ureter, inside the bladder, you have transitional. Now the question is why? Why you have transitional in those organs where you have urine? Because transitional epithelium does not allow the liquid pass through it. Make sense? So urine will not get back into the body. Like your urinary bladder is holding urine, right? For hours. Now if urine can get back through the wall into the body, is that good or bad? Bad, right? We don't want urine to get back into the body. Urine must be excreted, right? Out. So, the transitional epithelial, one important property is it does not permit the fluid or liquid pass through it. Allow does not allow the liquid pass through it. So the urine will stay inside the bladder or and ureter. Another property of transitional is transitional epithelium can be stretched, can be easily, you can expand it, and when you leave the pressure it will recoil. So it's like an elastic that you use in your clothes, right? You know that elastic things you use in your clothes. So you can make it longer or expand it and it will recoil. So urinary bladder is like that. You know, when a lot of urine gets big, when you urinate gets smaller. So the epithelium can get stretched.
So like your uterus, is it considered that part?
By changing the shape. So it can take or absorb pressure. So those are two important properties of transitional, and two locations I have mentioned where you have urine. Stratified cuboidal and stratified columnar, these are rarely present in very few structures in your body. Limited distribution in the body. So just remember, stratified cuboidal in the mammary gland, that means female breast, and stratified columnar small amount in pharynx and male urethra. Stratified columnar you don't need to remember for the exam, but of course everything you need to know, but for the exam I won't probably ask this one. Okay, so you can escape this.
You can escape this.
For the exam, but you should know everything, right? There's a lot. Stratified columnar, yes. Okay, so that's all about the epithelial tissue. Okay, did you understand what I said so far? I have to remember, that's important, right? I mentioned these are the locations, right? So you have to remember. Remembering is your part. I cannot be your brain. I can't go inside your brain. So you have to do that. Okay, now connective tissue. Connective tissue is the most widely distributed in your body. Most common type. You know, I mentioned at the beginning today that bones are connective tissue, cartilages are connective tissue, fats are connective tissue, blood is a connective tissue, right? Tendons, cartilage, ligaments, bursa, you mentioned, all those are connective tissue. But they are different from each other, right? Blood is completely different than fat. Fat is completely different than bones or cartilages. But why all those belong to connective tissue? The reason is all of them come from a single source, that is the mesenchyme or mesenchymal tissue, one type of embryonic tissue. So just remember, since all of them come from mesenchyme, all of them belong to the connective tissue. Connective tissue has varying degrees of vascularities. You must remember epithelial tissue is avascular, no blood vessels, right? Connective tissue has blood vessels, but the amount of blood vessel varies. For example, in bone, you have a small number of blood vessels. In cartilages, tendons and ligaments, interestingly, there is no blood vessel. So, in cartilage, ligament, tendon, no blood vessel. In bone, small number of blood vessels. Now let's go. Fat. Fat has more blood vessels, and blood itself is a connective tissue. So the vascularity varies. Presence of cells and non-living ground substances and fibers. You remember a few minutes ago I just quickly showed you how a typical connective tissue looks like. You have cells, they are not attached to each other, usually cells. So these are the cells. In between the cells you have matrix. Matrix consists of ground substances and fibers. Okay. So cells, and in between the cells you have the matrix. Matrix consists of ground substances, the chemicals, and fibers. Okay. So that's the connective tissue. Functions. Important functions of connective tissue are: number one, connects. Connective tissue connects. That's why it is called connective tissue. Its name is telling you, right? For example, let me give you good examples. Tendons, right? Ligaments. Ligaments connect bone to bone, one bone to another bone. Hold the bones together. Ligament. Tendon connects muscle to bone. So above the patella, you must remember, above the patella you have quadriceps tendon that connects the muscle to the patella. Below the patella you have patellar ligament. You remember the patellar ligament is used for knee jerk or knee reflex. So good example how the connective tissue connects. Number two, protects. There are many examples. Let me give you the best ones. You know, bones are connective tissue. So you already know that the cranial bones protect the most important organ of the body, right? What is that? The brain. So best example, you know, here you see this one, thoracic case is formed by the bones and cartilages. Both are connective tissue, right? Bones are connective tissue, cartilages are connective tissue, form the thoracic case, and it protects your heart, lung, and other structures inside the thoracic case. Make sense? So those are just a couple of examples. Support. You know that bones form the skeleton, and this is the structure. Skeleton supports your whole body. Whole body is supported by this, and this is actually formed by connective tissue, bones and cartilages. Flexibility. Some organs have flexibility. For example, best example is your ear. I can change the shape, right? Twist the ear. It has a lot of flexibility. You know, nasal septum. I can move the nasal septum, right? I can move it like this. It has flexibility. Elastic, because of elastic cartilage inside these structures. Lot of elastic fibers, so can change the shape, but when you release the pressure, will go back to its actual shape. Transport. The blood, you know, is a connective tissue, liquid form of connective tissue, and blood transports chemicals. Which chemicals? Gases, oxygen, carbon dioxide, right? You know that. Blood transports hormones, blood transports metabolic wastes, take them to the kidney for excretion. blood transport nutrients from the intestine to the body. So I just gave you few examples. What chemicals are transported by the blood? Nutrients, gases, right? Hormones, metabolic, toxic chemicals, those are transported. Now, three types of fibers. You see here, I mentioned that in the matrix, you have fibers. Not all connective tissues have fibers, but fibers are important component of connective tissue. So what are the fibers? Three types of fibers: collagen fibers, elastic fibers, and reticular fibers. You have seen all these fibers. You will see in next few slides, you will see those pictures you have seen, right? So you will remember that. And cells. Different connective tissues have different types of cells because the cells in the cartilage are called chondrocytes. Chondro means cartilage, cyte means cell. So cartilaginous cells are chondrocytes, osteocytes. Osteo means bone, cyte means cell. So osteocytes are the cells in the bone, chondrocytes are the cells in the cartilages, fat cells, right? Because fat is a connective tissue. Blood cells, blood is a connective tissue. So all these cells are connective tissue cells, depending on what type of connective tissue is that. Now, one thing is you must know the most common type of connective tissue cells are called fibroblasts. Fibroblasts you will often see most of the connective tissues, and fibroblasts produce fibers. That's why fibroblast. Here you see exactly what I showed you here, different types of cells. You see different types of fibers and ground substance. Now the classification of connective tissue, I believe I showed you in the lab, but let me do again. This is very important. So if you write it down, this will help you to follow everything. Connective tissue. So first, the main type is connective tissue proper. Connective tissue proper. That's the main type. That's why it is called proper. Proper means main. Then cartilages, right? Also, we know that bones, liquid or fluid type connective tissue. So now, connective tissue proper is divided into three types. So first, connective tissue proper is divided into two types: loose connective tissue proper and dense connective tissue proper. Okay, so connective tissue proper is divided into two: loose and dense. The loose, there are three types of loose, you know already: loose areolar, loose reticular, and loose adipose. Adipose is fat. Okay, fat. So these are three types of loose: loose areolar, loose reticular, and adipose. Dense two types. You already know, dense regular and dense irregular. Okay. Regular and irregular. Just you can write it down. Why one is called loose, another is called dense, because of the fibers. In loose, there is small amount of fibers or no fibers. That's why loose. Small amount of fibers or no fibers. In dense, you have huge amount of fibers, heavily packed, tightly packed. That's why it is called dense. Make sense? So all fibers are packed together. But in loose, no or few fibers. So which one is stronger? What do you think? Dense, right? Dense is stronger because fibers make the organ strong or structure strong. Cartilages. There are three types of cartilages. Most common type is called hyaline. Another type is fibro and elastic. Okay. Here you can just, for you to remember easily, you can write down in hyaline, no visible fibers in the matrix. In the matrix, we don't see fibers. So when you will see under the microscope or picture, you will see ground substance but no fibers. That is hyaline. In fibro, you have a lot of fibers. That's why it is called fibrocartilage, because you will see a lot of fibers. In elastic, you will find elastic type fibers. So easy to separate. No fiber in the matrix, huge amount of fibers, that is fibro, and if you see elastic fibers present, that is elastic. Now bones, two types of bones in the body. Hard bones are called compact and soft bone is called spongy. Okay. So two types of bones. You know that when you eat the chicken leg, right, you find hard bone, that is compact, and sometimes you can crash the soft bone, that is spongy. Liquid. Blood is the main liquid type connective tissue, but also lymph, another type of fluid present in the lymphatic system, lymph, that is also connective tissue. Okay, so this is the classification of the connective tissue. Very important. If you can just follow it, it will be easy for you to follow everything. Okay. Now, in next few slides, I will go over the pictures under the microscope. You already know that, and few locations you have to just write down or underline. Those are important ones, and those I mentioned, those are important for the exam. So this is loose areolar connective tissue proper, right? You see, in loose areolar, the fibers are collagen and elastic. You see the red colored, red stained fibers here are collagen fibers, and thin dark hair like fibers, those are the elastic fibers. How many of you remember this picture? Show me your hands. Okay, keep showing. Okay, show me your hands. Okay, why you guys don't remember? Do you remember this picture or not? Why you didn't show hands? You're scared? I'll ask questions. Okay, so
It's just been a while. Since we
No, not your exam is not yet done. It's just 2 days ago. Not too
We're not
long.
as smart as you.
I know, but these are the things, basic things you need to know. You saw the picture, you did draw the picture, and you saw under the microscope, right?
I know, but it's not.
Okay, so loose areolar. Remember, two things here, okay? One thing, I asked a very simple question. What is that? Did you see this? I didn't say what is this or what is that. If I ask that, tell me what type of fiber is this, that is a little bit difficult question. But I asked, did you see this picture?
Yes.
If you said no, you should just go and take the art class. Okay? You saw it again and again, many times. Okay? We have art over there, right? Other departments. Okay? So that is loose areolar. And where you will find loose areolar? You will find loose areolar in the basement membrane. You must remember, this one you should not forget. I told you that epithelial cells rest on the connective tissue. That is the basement membrane. So this is loose areolar type connective tissue. Okay. Basement membrane is also called lamina propria. You see in the picture in the left side, the cells, and under the cells you have that basement membrane. Another is in between the capillaries, in between, not inside, in between the capillaries or in between the blood vessels. Better write in between the blood vessels. So this is a blood vessel, this is another blood vessel. In between, around the blood vessels, you have loose areolar, so provides cushion. Blood vessels will not get, injured easily. It's like a soft tissue cushion. So around the blood vessels, again, write down around the blood vessels. That includes the capillaries, and in the lamina propria, which is the basement membrane. Just remember those two. Now, so we are done with areolar. Adipose. How many of you remember this one? Do you? You should remember. This is easier. You see, the adipose cells look white. Inside the adipose cells, almost empty. Few fat droplets are present, and since inside is empty, that's why the nucleus is not located in the center. Nucleus is attached to the membrane. So you see those dark structures, nuclei, are attached to the membrane. Adipose or fat, you already know in which areas in the body you find the adipose. Let me just mention a couple of those areas. One is under the skin, that is called subcutaneous fat. Under the skin. Female breast, right? Mesentery and omentum. Those are two structures. Let me write it down, the spelling. So under the skin, female breast, mesentery and omentum. These structures are inside the abdomen. So sometimes you get big stomach, right? A lot of fat accumulates under the muscle here. Under the abdominal wall, fat can accumulate. Sometimes it can be very thick pad of fat under the abdominal wall. So within the abdomen, in the mesentery and omentum. So now reticular. In reticular, you will see reticular fibers branching. You see these dark fibers, they branch. And where you will find the reticular connective tissue? Lymph organs. What are the lymph organs? You can write it down. Lymph nodes, right? Tonsils, spleen. Also write bone marrow. So, bone marrow and lymph organs. What are the lymph organs, everybody? Thymus, tonsil, lymph nodes, right? Spleen. So those are the lymph organs. So we are done with loops, three types of loops. Now dense regular and irregular. If you see, the fibers are heavily packed, but all fibers are going or running in same direction. That is called regular, because same direction, right? Fibroblasts. You will see fibroblasts, and these are collagen fibers. Collagen fibers and fibroblasts are the cells. But main thing here is that these fibers are same way, in same direction. That's why it is called regular. Where you will find dense regular, write it down. Tendons and ligaments. Tendons and ligaments. Dense irregular. In this type of dense, you have the fibers, but fibers are going in different directions. Not all fibers are in same direction. That's why it is called irregular. But these fibers are also collagen and cells are fibroblasts. So structurally, dense regular and irregular are same, but the arrangement of the fibers in one unit nice, another is irregular. Dense irregular is found in the joint capsule. You must remember in last class I mentioned around the joint you have the covering wrap. That's the joint capsule is dense irregular. Another structure, dermis of the skin. So capsule of the joints and dermis of the skin. Just remember this couple. Cartilages. Three types of cartilages are hyaline, elastic, fibro. Now let's see their pictures. You see, this is hyaline cartilage. You must remember. I'm not going to ask you. Okay. So this is hyaline. And what did I say? Hyaline, no fibers. You see, lot of matrix but no visible fibers. In cartilage and bone, you remember one thing, the cells are always sitting inside lacunae. Like this is lacunae, cavity, and cells are sitting inside it. This is nucleus. So this is the cell, this cavity is the lacunae. So this is lacunae, this is the cell, this is the nucleus. Okay, in bones and cartilages. So here you see chondrocytes, since this is cartilage, cells are chondrocytes, chondro means cartilage, sitting in the lacunae, no fibers seen in the matrix. Write it down the locations. Hyaline is the most common type, so in many structures you will find hyaline. Number one, whole fetal skeleton of the fetus. Whole skeleton of a fetus is hyaline. There is no bone. Hyaline cartilage. Number two, these cartilages are called costal cartilages attached to the ribs. Costal, C-O-S-T-A-L. Costal cartilages. Respiratory tract cartilages. In your trachea, larynx, right? You have cartilages. Respiratory tract cartilages. So how many I have mentioned? 3, right? skeleton of the fetus, costal cartilages, and respiratory tract. Now, joint cartilage or articular cartilage, I talked about that in last class. End of the bones in the joint, the end of the bones, you must remember, look at me, I mentioned end of the bones are covered by cartilage. Articular cartilage, articular means joint, very simple. So those are hyaline type cartilage. Now let's go to another type of cartilage. This is called elastic cartilage. In elastic cartilage, many cells, small amount of matrix, but in the matrix you have elastic fibers. So many cells, small amount of matrix, but matrix has elastic fibers. You see those dark lines, those are elastic fibers. Where you will find those organs have elasticity, flexibility, like ear, right? I mentioned, you remember that? In the ear, epiglottis, both start with E, ear and epiglottis. Inside the larynx, you have epiglottis, so those are elastic. Fibrocartilage has plenty of fibers, that's why it is called fibro. You remember I mentioned lot of fibers. You see here, lot of fibers. So fibrocartilage, where you will find, write it down. Fibrocartilage, only few areas. You see here, intervertebral discs. Intervertebral discs in between the vertebrae. And this is called anybody? What is this? Pubic symphysis, right? Pubic symphysis. You have studied the bone. So this is also fibrocartilage. So how many I mentioned? Two, right? Intervertebral discs and pubic symphysis. Another structure, meniscus. I believe you have heard meniscus in the knee joint, right? So that is also fibrocartilaginous structure. So just how many I mentioned? Can you tell those? Very good. Pubic symphysis and what else? But which structure? There are many structures in a joint. Meniscus, right? Meniscus. Have you heard torning meniscus?
Yeah.
Torning of. So those are fibro. So now let's see. Very easy to separate. You see here, hyaline. No what? Fibers, right? Few cells in lacunae, plenty of matrix. Make sense? Lot of matrix, few cells, no fibers. Here, few or more cells. More cells, right? Many cells. And that's why small amount of matrix, but in the matrix you have fibers or not? What type of fibers? Elastic fibers. That's why elastic. So just opposite, right? Here, few cells, more matrix, no fibers. More cells, few matrix, fibers. Clear? And this one, it is fibro. That means what? Huge amount of fibers. Make sense? So this is fibro. So just when you will study, think why is that and how you can, distinguish, separate one from another, put side by side and do it. Okay, so let's stop here. Yeah.